The Silent Shadow. The legend of the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife. The night air in occupied Norway was freezing, but the British commando lying prone in the snow didn't feel the cold. His world had narrowed to a single point of focus. The German sentry pacing 20 yards ahead. The sentry stopped to adjust his rifle, the flare of a match briefly illuminating a bored, tired face. It would be the last thing he ever saw. In 1940, the war was not being won with massive tank battalions or thundering artillery barrages. For the British, pushed off the continent at Dunkirk, the war had moved into the shadows. Raids, sabotage, and intelligence gathering became the lifeline of the Allied effort. But these missions required a new kind of violence. A gunshot was a death sentence for the raiding party, alerting the entire garrison. A bludgeon was messy and unreliable. A garrote required too much time. The commandos needed a ghoster weapon that could extinguish a life instantly, silently, and instinctively. They found their answer in a slender, ribbed piece of blackened steel that would become the most feared blade of the 20th century. The Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife. The architects of mayhem, Shanghai origins. To understand the knife, one must understand the men who created it. William Ewart Fairbairn and Eric Anthony Sykes were not traditional soldiers. They were survivors of the most dangerous streets on earth. Before the outbreak of World War II, both men served in the Shanghai Municipal Police SMP in the 1920s and 30s. Shanghai was a boiling cauldron of gang warfare, opium smuggling, and political assassination. It was a city where police officers were involved in gunfights daily. Fairbairn, in particular, was reported to have been involved in over 600 combat situations. Traditional police training was useless in the alleyways of Shanghai. Fairbairn and Sykes developed a brutal, pragmatic system of close-quarters combat known as defendu. It borrowed from jiu-jitsu, boxing, and pure gutter fighting. They learned exactly how the human body broke, how it bled, and how it died. When they returned to Britain in 1940, the military establishment was desperate. The newly formed commandos needed instructors who understood dirty fighting. Fairbairn and Sykes were commissioned as captains and sent to the Special Training Centre at Lochillet in Scotland. It was here, amidst the rugged highlands, that they realized the standard-issue bayonets and trench knives were woefully inadequate for the stealth missions the commandos were being trained for. In close-quarters fighting, there is no more deadly weapon than the knife. In choosing a knife, there are two important factors to bear in mind: balance and keenness. W.E. Fairbairn, Olin Fighting 1942. The philosophy of the needle. The design of the FS knife was a radical departure from the heavy, Bowie-style knives popular in America or the utility trench daggers of WWII. Fairbairn and Sykes knew that in a sentry removal scenario, slashing is ineffective. Heavy clothing, webbing, and greatcoats worn by German soldiers rendered slashing attacks superficial. To kill silently, one had to puncture vital organs or arteries deep within the body. The FS knife was designed purely for thrusting. The anatomy of the blade. The blade, a double-edged stiletto tapering to a needle-sharp point. This allowed it to slip between ribs and through heavy wool coats with almost zero resistance. The length. The blade was roughly 7 inches long, calculated specifically to be long enough to reach the heart or subclavian artery through a winter coat, but short enough to be drawn quickly. The handle, initially made of brass with a knurled diamond pattern first pattern, and later a ringed zinc alloy cast second and third patterns, it was weighted precisely to balance the knife at the crossguard. The balance. The weapon was so perfectly balanced that it felt weightless in the hand, allowing for rapid fluid changes in grip. The brilliance of the design lay in its singularity of purpose. It was not a tool for opening rations or cutting wire. It was a precision instrument for homicide. Production and patterns. Evolution of an icon as the war progressed. The knife evolved to meet the demands of mass production and field feedback. Collectors and historians categorized the FS knife into 3 distinct patterns. The first pattern, 1940-1941, the rarest and most coveted version. The first pattern featured a ricasso, a flat section of steel at the base of the blade with the etched logos of the manufacturer's Wilkinson's sword. The handguard was S-shaped, designed to catch an opponent's blade in a knife fight. The grip was knurled brass, providing excellent traction. It was a work of art, but expensive and slow to produce. The second pattern, 1941-1943, to speed up production, the ricasso was removed, and the blade was ground into a pure diamond cross-section from tip to guard. The S-guard was replaced with a straight cross-guard. The handle remained knurled brass or nickel. This is considered by many combat veterans to be the best balance between quality and utility. The third pattern, 1943, as the commandos grew in number, millions of knives were needed. The third pattern introduced the ribbed ringed grip, which looked somewhat like a stack of washers made from a zinc alloy casting. This was the cheapest to make and became the standard issue for the remainder of the war. While slightly less balanced than its predecessors, it remained lethally effective. Silent killing. The technique. The knife was only as good as the hand holding it. At the Commando Basic Training Center at Achnacarry, Fairbairn and his team taught soldiers how to use the weapon with terrifying efficiency. The training was not about dueling, it was about elimination. Recruits were taught to approach a sentry from behind, clamp a hand over the mouth to prevent a scream, and drive the knife into specific anatomical targets. The subclavian artery, accessed by stabbing downward into the hollow behind the collarbone. This would cause a rapid drop in blood pressure, leading to unconsciousness in seconds. The kidneys, a thrust to the lower back, induced immediate shock. The carotid artery, a side thrust to the neck. Fairbairn emphasized speed and aggression. In his seminal manual Get Tough, he wrote about the psychological advantage of the knife. It was a weapon of terror. In the field from Dieppe to D-Day, the F's knife saw action in every theater of the war. It was carried by the British Commandos, the Special Air Service SAS, the Special Operations Executive SO, and even the American Arson Darby's Rangers. The raid on St. Nazaire. During the daring raid on the St. Nazaire dry dock Operation Chariot in 1942, commandos found themselves in close-quarters urban combat. In the chaos of the burning port, where ammunition ran low and the fighting became hand-to-hand, the F's knife proved its worth. It allowed commandos to move silently through the dockyard shadows, eliminating sentries before blowing up the pumping machinery. The resistance connection. The SO dropped thousands of these knives into occupied France, Holland, and Norway. For a French resistance fighter, a Sten gun was hard to hide, but an F's knife could be slipped into a boot or up a sleeve. It became a symbol of silent resistance. There are accounts of resistance fighters using the knife to eliminate Gestapo officers in crowded cafes or dark alleys, vanishing before the body hit the floor. The German reaction. The efficacy of the British commandos and their gangster methods, as Hitler called them, enraged the German High Command. The existence of the F's knife, and the silent killing training that accompanied it, contributed to Hitler's infamous Kommandobefehl Commando Order of 1942, which stated that all captured commandos were to be executed immediately without trial. The Germans recognized that men carrying these knives were not ordinary soldiers. They were highly trained assassins designed to dismantle the German war machine from the inside. A captured German intelligence report allegedly described the F's knife as the most dangerous hand weapon in the war, noting that it appeared British. Soldiers were being trained in methods of murder previously known only to the criminal underworld. The legacy, more than just steel. By the end of 1945, the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife had transcended its physical form to become a symbol. It represented the tip of the spear, the elite, the unconventional, the brave. Its influence on knife design was absolute. The U.S. Marine Raider stiletto was a direct copy. The V-42 stiletto used by the 1st Special Service Force, the Devil's Brigade, was heavily inspired by it. Almost every combat dagger produced in the post-war era owes its lineage to Fairbairn and Sykes today. The FS knife is still featured on the insignias of the British Royal Marines Commandos ***, the Belgian Commandos ***, the Belgian Commando Corps, the Australian 1st Commando Regiment, the United States Army Rangers, specifically the modernized design in their crest. It remains a ceremonial weapon for many of these units, and in some cases, is still carried into combat by those who value its grim history in perfect balance. Conclusion. The Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife was born out of desperation in the darkest days of World War II. It was not designed for glory, nor for fair fights. It was a tool designed to solve a very specific problem: how to kill a man quickly and silently in the dark. William Fairbairn and Eric Sykes took the brutality of the Shanghai waterfront and refined it into a weapon of war. In doing so, they changed the face of special operations forever. The knife remains a testament to the cold, hard reality of commando warfare, where the difference between life and death is often measured in inches of steel and seconds of silence.